Peter, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie.
So good to have you here. Peter and I have met a number of times. Often I visit you in Bet Sahur at the East Jerusalem YMCA. It's a real privilege to have you here with us. Peter, could you introduce yourself?
My name is Peter Nasir, and I'm the General Secretary of the East Jerusalem YMCA.
East Jerusalem YMCA are one of Embrace's longest standing partners in the West Bank. We've had a lot of work dealing with children who are ex-detainees, and obviously we'll be talking more about that this week as we spend some time in Parliament. Peter, to talk about the context, you live in a really beautiful part of the world. It's a place with a rich history, vibrant culture and traditions, but it's also a place that's seen a lot of conflict. What do you love about being a Palestinian and living in your land, and what are some of the things that you find difficult?
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for the invitation and for having me here. So first of all, I love the country. The weather is moderate. It's warm throughout, mostly warm, not overbearingly warm though. The topography is amazing for such a small place. There's so much diversity. The culture is really rich, and it's a crossroads of so many cultures that have lived there and that have been there from ancient times to modern times, and so you get this mix of everything, and then everyone in the world wants to come to Jerusalem and do the pilgrimage in Jerusalem and in Bethlehem, and so we're very exposed to so many people. Palestinians as a group are very generous, very hospitable, very overbearingly sometimes welcoming, and they will assist you and they will stand by you, and they don't like to see injustice, and they will genuinely follow through and stand by you so long as you need help, and they care about how you're feeling. It's not enough that you're well. You have to really demonstrate to them that you are well. So this is kind of the culture that I'm proud to be a part of. The difficulties, of course, stem from the occupation, we're sort of a byproduct of political theory that started halfway around the world away from us, and then we are suffering the consequences of a lot of this polarization that happened in the 19th and 20th century in Europe, and we became the solution to all these problems without anyone ever including us in this decision.
Yeah, I think something that we can talk on a little bit later is there is a sense of nothing should be about us without us, and it feels like Palestinians need to be included. Your voices need to be heard. I've really experienced the hospitality that you've talked about. You're right, people just make you feel so welcome as an outsider going in. You talked about UK Christians and international Christians visiting. People do want to visit the holy sites, they want to visit the early churches, but Palestinians often refer to themselves as living stones, as you can trace your history right back to the time of Jesus. Can you tell us a little bit about the Christian community in the West Bank today?
The Christian community in the West Bank, and this is what I'm here to do more than to tell my story, is more to represent my community and to be a voice for those who are those who don't have the ability to express themselves, or to be given a platform. The Christian community are shrinking, and they are becoming an endangered species, so to say. Yeah. At the founding in 1948, at the time of the Nakba and the founding of Israel, Palestinians used to comprise about 300,000, the population of 1.3 million, which was Arab. Today we are under 1% of the entire population. In Jerusalem there's about estimates of 5,500 to 9,000 Christians left, which used to be at the turn of the 20th century a dominantly Christian city. Bethlehem is 20% Christian instead of 100%. Ramallah is 5% Christian instead of being 100%. So the conflict has taken its toll on the Christian community there. And for me, I went to school with about 30 students, 30 classmates. Today, 3 of us, my brother, my sister, no longer live in Palestine. So the Christian community is dwindling. When we describe ourselves as the living stones, we are referring to the Bible, and we are referring to the fact that churches are not buildings, and you cannot worship buildings. Churches is where 2 people come together in the name of God, and that's what the faith is about. So we find it a little strange that people will come to the end of the world, from the end of the world, to come to visit the Nativity and the Holy Sepulchre, and step over and ignore the parish, the local people who are suffering, and go enjoy the glory of the building that symbolizes the birth and the resurrection, while their own brothers and sisters, the people who carried the faith, and the people without whom the faith probably would not have spread, And to ignore them and ignore that reality, we feel very ostracized, and we feel very marginalized by world Christianity.
Yeah, I love that. We are told in the Bible, when two or three are gathered, God is with us. And it seems ridiculous to travel to that part of the world and not meet local Christians and gather together in God's presence.
Absolutely.
It feels like there is a real journey to explain to Christians in the West that Christians in the Middle East are not imports, they're not implants, but you're people who've been there for thousands of years. I talked to a friend of mine who runs a church in the old city, and he would often say, people ask me, when did I convert? Yeah. He said, well, I didn't. My family were in the upper room. And maybe he's joking, but it kind of talks about the roots.
2,000 years ago. That's usually my answer to when I converted. Yeah.
Fabulous. Talk to me about daily life in the West Bank. I've been travelling to the West Bank and to Israel for the last sort of 12 or 13 years, and I've seen day-to-day life change. How does the occupation impact how you live, and how has it changed particularly since the 7th of October 2023?
So the occupation is about total control. It's about allowing you a small space, so long as the space is within the boundaries that were drawn for you. It's a lack of self-determination, not just self-determination in terms of having borders, etc. It's self-determination in terms of your own municipality, having building permits and living and having work and being able to grow and foster a family and grow a community. The whole country of Israel is set up to allow that to happen for exclusively one group, which is the Jewish people. If it allowed it for the rest of us, I think a lot of these problems would become very, they would remain, but they would change the nature of the life and the conflict, and they would allow young people opportunities, so they wouldn't think of leaving. To give the big examples that are obvious is the streets and the control and the checkpoints, but that's not the details. The details where we're allowed to live, who we're allowed to marry, how we can, if we travel for a while and come back, are we allowed to come back into the country or not? Do we maintain? So I have a residency status. I have the status of an immigrant in a country not only I was born in. But to go back to history, my grandmother from my father's side has a banner in the Holy Sepulchre Church for her family. That means that they are one of the 7 oldest Christian families of Jerusalem. So who decides whether I rightfully live there or belong there or not? And that decision is not up to me. That decision is not up to even my people. That decision is up to a foreign body that has come and makes these decisions on our behalf. It's a very passive, violent system. And I say violent because feeling that you are always being pushed to the side, that you are not welcomed, that you have no future, that somebody believes that your home, your property are theirs, and that you are an infringement upon where you are born and raised. That takes its toll on you, and the whole system is set up like that. So while it is in the times when there is no violence, from our point of view, that violence continues. Just having a neighbor who looks at you and with an eye of tomorrow what you have is going to be mine also creates a lot of anxiety, and it creates a lot of pressure on us as both communities, in terms of, I don't want to say even both communities, because I don't find a big difference between Muslims and Christians. I find that they are both Palestinians who pray very differently. But the community of Palestinians are suffering a lot for the privilege of Jewish people from all over the world to be allowed to immigrate, have a home, etc. in Israel, which is fine. Is a Jewish self-determination for sure. The idea is, what consequences does that have for the local population? Yeah. How is that translated for somebody who's not Jewish within that country? And some of these questions that need to be talked to and addressed in what would be a democratic conversation.
Yeah. I know that you, through the YMCA, run a project called the Olive Tree Project. Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges that olive tree farmers are facing at this time of year? Because I know that the practical access issues are kind of magnified when it comes to harvest, which is what should be happening at the moment.
Yes, so we afford farmers the ability to we afford people all over the world the ability to sponsor olive trees that we plant or we give to farmers to plant in the West Bank. Normally, that's a very straightforward thing and should not be challenged. Planting olive trees is just a very normal, very biblical thing for that part of the world as well. So today we face there are systematic. Normally, it was more ad hoc. There were more violent pockets in the West Bank of settlers who would stop Palestinians from farming their land, or the Israeli army not allowing access except for certain limited times for people to farm their land and to pick olives. Today, people are being banned from getting to their lands. The settlers are cutting down trees at extraordinary rates never seen before. They are picking the olives, fruits of the Palestinian farmers. And to put into perspective to people, the olive trees are a source of income. We like to call them a very Palestinian tree because they're very stubborn, they're very rooted in their land, and they're very difficult to get rid of.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, when Jesus wept, he wept under our olive trees. He didn't. This is a tradition that we Palestinians have carried since the days of the Romans and the Greeks from over 2,000 years ago, that we continue to maintain in that tradition. And for someone to disregard that, it just kind of shows you the disconnect between the history of the land and those who come to it for different purposes.
Yeah, and what would you say to people who say, I can buy an olive tree, but it might get burnt down tomorrow? Why is it still important that they keep buying them, keep supporting?
It's because it allows the steadfastness and the resilience of the community. It allows us to highlight the stories of these farmers. These are abnormal stories that trees should be attacked. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. And if we gave up at the first tree that was cut down, we wouldn't have any olive trees left in the West Bank, most likely. But it's this idea of, to kind of quote John 10:10, the thief comes to kill and destroy, but we come to give life and give it in abundance. So we do not get back down from the challenge of somebody telling us you don't belong here, and this is not gonna. It's not something we submit to so easily, which is why the conflict continues to rage.
Yeah. I guess one of the major challenges of life in the West Bank is the impact of settlers. We've talked about the challenges of access. We've talked about olive trees being destroyed. People may have read in the media that villages get attacked regularly, and there's been stories recently about Christian villages being attacked, which I think is a new thing. Now, we don't want to exceptionalise Christians. The impact of the occupation is on everybody, but it starts to say something when even small Christian communities are targeted. Could you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Eyre?
And Eyre is the last remaining 100% Christian population village in the West Bank. There are outposts of youth, I believe. Again, we're not privy to a lot of details of this information, and it's kept away from the public so that the perpetrators can avoid any sort of accountability. But they're called outposts, and what they do is they bring their livestock into the community, they harass the community, they burn olive trees. They don't tell the difference. For them, an Arab is an Arab. Doesn't matter. So they've been coming closer, and eventually they burnt the fields around one of the oldest churches in Palestine. The community of Eyre is on the eastern slopes of the West Bank, and it's part of those areas that they want to kind of close up, and there seems to be an attempt to push people into the cities. It's also important to note not just Eyre, so Bethlehem, the governorate of Bethlehem, the city and the villages that surround it. Bethlehem only retains 9% of its land. The majority of Bethlehem's land has been taken over for settlement purposes and for Jewish-only purposes. So that's another very passive, violent way of that has manifested itself against Christians over several years, over decades now, and it's nobody. You're not allowed to protest. Violence is, of course, we don't approve of violence as Christians, but even non-violence is considered racist and anti-Semitic, and so there's nothing you're able to do except for sit there and take it quietly, and this is why you also have these very big spikes of reaction, very emotional reactions, because you are stifled to the point that when you are able to find an opening and react, you try to do, as not me, but the youth who do it, end up doing as much damage as they think they possibly can. They lose that wall of empathy or logic or reason in terms of what they do. So the Christians overall are their land and their properties also in Jerusalem. There is a big push to take over Jaffa Gate, which is historically part of the Christian Quarter. And so we've in Saturday of Light, which is an Orthodox Easter. This is usually the bigger holiday in Jerusalem, and the scouts usually go in Omar al-Mukhtar Square, which is in Jaffa Gate. We've been not allowed to go there, so that the Jewish worshippers can have access to the Wailing Wall on that day, one day of the year, where Jerusalem can look Christian, but that's not allowed. So the freedom of religion is also confined to the churches. You're not allowed to display a lot of religious symbolism outside of the churches, because Jerusalem has to maintain its identity, or has to have an identity, not maintain it, because its identity is pluralistic of all three religions, but Israel is trying to change that into one identity, which is Jewish Jerusalem.
Something you said, talking about young people losing their empathy and responding violently. I know that the work, so this is a nice segue into what you do with East Jerusalem YMCA. I'm always impressed when I meet young people who've benefited from your program. Young people who've been brutalised, they've been in prison, but they come out, and through the work that your team do, they are productive members of society. They are peaceful, they are non-violent. They're seeking to make a change. Can you talk to me about the work that you do with young people who have been affected by political violence and the occupation? Talk to us a little bit about the sort of things that you do with these young people and the importance of the work of the East Jerusalem YMCA.
Sure, it's a great question. So we work with youth who are released from detention for political reasons. So it's important to understand they are not criminal children. And these are children who have a stance and an issue, and they try to pursue that. A lot of them are actually arrested, most likely for throwing rocks against the army. But it's important to note that they do not go to Jerusalem or to Tel Aviv, or even the settlements around them to go do this. This usually happens in their schools, in their neighborhoods, in their yards, where they are. It's where their safe spaces, and it's the army, from their point of view, that's intruding upon them. The Israeli army will tell you we are patrolling, which sounds very passive, but for them they find. So anyway, we work with these children on first of all to instill self-worth. They have to understand that we love them. We don't do this for any political reason. We do this because these are children, and children deserve rehabilitation, not punishment.
Yeah. And
children are mischievous, and that's the beauty of children. And youth have a chance to make mistakes and correct these mistakes and learn from them. None of us are perfect. And so the idea is, how do we remove the stigma that the whole society or the whole world wants to label these children, which is just to blanket call them terrorists or to call them bad kids. But they're not. They're born in bad circumstances, and they react to the circumstances around them. So we try to work on their self-worth, and to also, you can't say heal trauma, because to heal trauma, you have to make sure the people are not exposed to trauma again.
Yeah.
But we help them cope with future trauma that they will experience, and how not to give in to hate. And then our priority is usually to re-enroll children back into school. The idea is that they do not skip stages in their upbringing, so that they don't become adults too quickly. And the imprisonment process really creates premature men out of these boys. And so we go back to making them smile and making them feel that they are children, explaining the importance of them going through different stages of development. And the ones who refuse to go back to school or are in prison for too much of a time, then we try to teach a vocation. And the idea is that they have to keep busy, they have to be productive, and they have to build on small successes. And once they feel these successes, it reinforces the value of self-worth and self-reliance, and it allows them to break through that and reintegrate back into society as a positive contributing member of society. There are two paths these kids can take. They could be destructive or constructive. And we don't blame them and we don't tell them anything. We do the Christian thing. We try to explain that having a future and having a family is just as much for an expression of your identity as resisting could be. And the second they decide to walk down the constructive path, we'll gladly join them and walk next to them. We do not push them into any path, we do not try to, but we try to offer them two clear paths for them to choose.
Yeah, it's really encouraging, and I've met numerous children in this situation, had the privilege to travel with you and your team, and to meet families who've been really positively impacted by this, meeting kids who were arrested and held, but who now live a different life, and who are clearly healing, even if it's a long-term, step-by-step process, as you say, or given the opportunity to manage their trauma. And
their smiles are just a reflection of that healing.
You see it in their faces, and I guess in the faces of their families too, because there's a need to reintegrate them back with their families as much as into society. It's needed on so many levels. How long do you work with these kids for after they've come out?
On average, depends on the trauma and depends on the case and the period of detention. The light cases usually have an average of 4 counseling sessions, and then we would go through the process of making up making up for material that they missed when they were from school, when they were incarcerated, etc. The process takes around a maximum of 3 months, is idealistically. There are cases of heavily traumatized children who've experienced a very hard detention, including torture, and those used to need about 15 sessions on average. Since October, we're seeing the need for 20, 25, and some even 30 sessions of counseling. These are 1.5-hour sessions that are usually done once a week, so it might drag to 6 months even sometimes. That some isolated cases will drag that long.
So tomorrow you're talking about this issue in the Houses of Parliament with us. Thank you so much. We get to stand in front of MPs and Lords and share a little bit about this work. Can you tell us about why it's so important to get in front of lawmakers to talk about children who've been behind bars and why the rehabilitation is so necessary?
It's important for the politicians to be properly informed, and they are supposed to represent the greater good, and they're supposed to, even if it is a foreign place that doesn't affect directly their constituents, but it's an issue that's become cross-cutting for humanity, and it's an issue that none of us can accept or contribute towards. And so it's important to highlight to parliamentarians who see things from a distance that these are actually children, and their children could make the same mistakes. And you cannot accept to forgive your child, but not to forget somebody else's child. Children are children. And so it's important to give a voice to these kids. We owe it to them. As a Palestinian, I'll tell you, I'm not very hopeful of change. It's not very easy to see. You can see how black and white the issue is, and people hide behind that it's complicated. Death and hate and occupation is complicated. Peace and love are very simple. You just treat people equally and look them and give justice, and then things will solve themselves. Things can be solved very easily. So if you want to solve it, it's not complicated. It's to avoid solving it that you claim it's complicated. So we hope that we owe it, even if personally, it doesn't matter what I personally believe. What matters is that these children deserve to have a voice, and that voice deserves to be heard by the politicians. And in the hope that it will intrigue some kind of change, and we'll always, pray and be ready for the day when we can join the nations of the world in equality and on equal footing. We don't want to be above or below anybody. We just want to have the same level playing field.
I think that's a really good message to land with as we kind of bring this conversation to a close. This is about equality. This is about equal rights. This is about valuing everybody, and seeing the faces of individuals, not writing people off as an enemy, but recognising children as children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really important. If there's a final message that you'd like to give our supporters in the UK, what is it?
I would tell them, especially the embrace supporters and the church and the Christians of the UK. We do not have a faith that teaches us to hate. We do not have a faith that teaches us to take revenge. We have a faith that compels us to treat everyone equally, to forgive, to love our neighbor, to love our enemy.
Yeah.
And at what point do we stop trying to translate scriptures and actually start to live out the life? Because the life of Jesus was very straightforward.
Yeah.
And so we pray for you that you will stop looking at us as being different from you. We are humans first and foremost. We share the same faith, and we probably live out that faith and under very challenging and testing times, and yet we still hold on to this faith, and we represent the land of prophets and the land of Jesus and the land of the Holy Land. And so it comes with a responsibility as well of us, and it comes with a responsibility for the rest of the world to also recognize that that land also deserves peace. So we pray for peace. So.
I think that's a brilliant place to leave it. We pray for peace. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for having me.